This occurred several months ago during the spring season. It was a peculiar interim phase in my life. I was freshly graduated with no immediate obligations on my plate and an abundance of spare time. I had wrapped up my education a semester ahead of schedule, which felt like a lifesaver amidst the deluge of coursework. However, once I found myself with this surplus of leisure time, I was at a loss for how to use it. My full-time employment wasn't commencing until June, and the majority of my friends were engrossed with their ongoing studies or final exams. Consequently, I felt as if I was in a state of limbo, caught between two periods of my life. The sensation was quite disconcerting and left me feeling unimportant. I'm the type of person who thrives on productivity, so sitting idle day after day watching the clock tick was torturous. This is likely why I agreed when my mother requested that I inspect my Uncle Rick's beach residency. It was a simple task: drive to Rehoboth Beach, ensure there were no leaks or damages, and perform minor upkeep to save Rick the expense of hiring a professional. It's worth noting that I hail from Pennsylvania, and Rick's property is in Delaware, making the journey a manageable 2-hour drive. The residence is substantial, capacious enough to accommodate my extended family each summer. 25 of us crammed into one location, engaging in games and overindulging in spirits. These activities are the defining characteristics of our clan. The house isn't exactly beachfront, but it's not too distant from the beach either. It's nestled in a subdued neighborhood surrounded by towering beach grass and meandering roads. Fast forward to an indistinct weekday that I can't pinpoint. I think it was a Thursday. I embarked on the drive in the late afternoon, which in retrospect wasn't the wisest choice. The journey was relatively calm. Upon arrival, everything appeared to be in order. I entered the house and commenced the checklist provided by Rick. I inspected the taps, the circuit breakers, and surveyed the property. All seemed well. To be perfectly candid, the solitude felt odd. I had never experienced the house devoid of scattered board games and the boisterous chatter of family members. The silence was certainly the most unsettling aspect. The place felt deserted. I'm sure many of you have a particular locale, whether a house or a restaurant, that resonates with the lively hubbub of your family gathering. Now imagine that venue vacant and silent. Quite chilling, isn't it? As the day grew late, and knowing my aversion to night driving, I texted my mother to inform her I would stay overnight and return the following morning. She approved of my decision and reminded me to express my gratitude to Uncle Rick for his hospitality, which I did. I prepared some food, played around on my phone for a while, and then began to prepare for bed. During our family get-togethers, I often found myself squeezed into one of the tinier rooms on the top floor, while the rest of my relatives occupied the more spacious and luxurious rooms. I'm not griping about the arrangement, just sharing how it usually unfolded. But on that night, with the house all to myself, I thought I'd seize the opportunity. The main bedroom on the first floor was equipped with an ensuite, an enormous walk-in wardrobe, and an unbelievably plush bed. The choice was a no-brainer. That's where I'd be spending the night. I hopped into bed around midnight and almost instantaneously fell asleep. I can't recall the exact time when I woke up, only that something jolted me awake. Still slightly disoriented, I was certain I'd heard a sound emanating from the wardrobe, as if something had toppled over in there. Silently, I angled my head towards the wardrobe. This minor movement sent my pulse skyrocketing. My mind was alert, but my body refused to act. I was experiencing a form of sleep paralysis without the paralysis. I could move. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to discover if there was something lurking in that wardrobe. I clenched my eyes shut, urging myself to fall back asleep, and I nearly did. But just as I was slipping back into slumber, I heard it, a muffled bump from within the wardrobe. I barely opened my eyes and tried to convince myself that I was imagining things. But I knew I wasn't. As if seized by an unseen force, I lay there completely immobilized, unable to command my body. Not like before, this time it was the real deal. The idea of being rooted to the spot suddenly became a terrifying reality. I listened in sheer terror as the wardrobe door began to creak open. Through half-closed eyes, I watched as a shadowy figure emerged into the room. It simply stood there by the bed, eerily staring at me. Perhaps 20 seconds elapsed, each one seeming to last an eternity. Then, without a sound, it turned and exited the room. I remained perfectly still, barely daring to breathe. The footsteps echoed across the floor, but instead of heading downward as I had anticipated, they ascended towards the 3rd floor. My stomach twisted in knots. The only staircase led up. There was no escape route from there. My senses were screaming at me to act, but I was petrified. I couldn't take on a full-grown man. I had no idea if he was armed. All I could do was wait. After enduring a few agonizing moments of mental turmoil, I mustered the bravery to break free from my paralysis. Stealthily, I reached for my phone and dialed 911. As soon as the operator answered, I whispered as softly as I could, informing them that there was an intruder in the house. I slid out of bed and silently turned the lock on the bedroom door. Then I waited. The minutes crawled by painfully slowly until the flashing red and blue lights filled the windows. I was taken aback by how swiftly the police arrived. I dashed down the stairs, flung the front door wide open, and nearly buckled with relief at the sight of the police. Without a moment's delay, they charged in, rapidly making their way through the house. I chose to wait outside. Before long, they announced that the house was vacant. I was dumbfounded. I had distinctly heard the footsteps ascend, and there was no exit from there, so the intruder had to be still inside the house. No other explanation made sense. The police were adamant that he must have slipped past me unnoticed, as I was too panicked to register. I knew that wasn't the case, but what could I argue? The man had disappeared. I wasn't comfortable with the police leaving, so I dialed Rick. Rick was not having any of it. He chastised the police and demanded a second search, arguing that my life could have been at stake. Consequently, they acceded. They conducted a more rigorous search this time. Rick advised me to trail behind them and observe their actions. I obliged. The officers were systematic, inspecting every closet, looking underneath beds, tapping walls as if they expected to find something concealed. They drew back the shower curtains in every bathroom, rechecked the door and window locks, and that's when they discovered it. A window in one of the bedrooms on the 3rd floor, the room I was supposed to be sleeping in, was not locked. One officer guarded the door while the other descended to the backyard. I chose to accompany the latter, primarily because the idea of being cooped up in the house with an unknown person turned my stomach. The officer cast his flashlight around the premises, but found nothing unusual. He then directed the beam towards the roof, and to my utter horror, it illuminated a dreadful sight. It was him, the stranger who had been inside the house. He was chilling out on the roof, a revolting bald man in shredded clothes who looked like he had been deprived of a shower for ages. The subsequent hour was a whirlwind. The officers communicated amongst themselves and managed to get the man off the roof and handcuffed. The police speculated that he was likely a homeless man who had been squatting in the house for days or longer. However, when they questioned him about how he gained entry, how long he had been there, and why he had chosen to hide in the closet, he remained silent. His eyes retained that eerie, vacant look as if none of it mattered at all. He was ushered into the back of a police car not long after, and that was the end of that. The whole incident was so bizarre that I still struggle to comprehend it. Despite my best efforts, I can't understand why that man chose that particular closet to hide in. Perhaps he heard me come in and sought refuge in the first place he could find. I still can't figure out how he got into the house. Neither can Rick. It's impossible to reach the roof from the ground level, so that theory seems rather implausible. The rest of my extended family has been persistently urging Rick to enhance his home security, but he has consistently declined for reasons I can't fathom. The idea that had I chosen to sleep in my designated bedroom, the course of that night could have diverged greatly is horrifying. Music. My friend Mike owns an exquisite beach house on the Jersey Shore. To say it's a gorgeous property is to understate its beauty. It's simply breathtaking. At least that's how I see it. Someone who didn't grow up with much. I can't claim to know its history in detail. It's not my ancestral house after all. But from my understanding, the house has been passed down through their lineage for generations. Mike's grandparents intended to make the house their permanent abode for the longest time. Tragically, they both passed away recently. With no one residing there now, the house mostly remains unoccupied since Mike's extended family is based on the West Coast, and his parents are too preoccupied to utilize it properly. The silver lining in this otherwise melancholy situation is that Mike has unrestricted access to the property. I believe Mike's father had plans to lease the house to generate some extra income, but there seems to be no movement on that front as of now. Finding someone willing to rent a beach house during the off-season isn't exactly a walk in the park, so it's hard to fault him. Around mid-July, Mike contacted me and proposed I join him for the weekend. He didn't need to convince me. I had no plans, and the thought of relaxing in a beach house, especially a plush one, was an instant yes. His plan was straightforward. We'd relax, possibly hit the beach during the day, then head to the boardwalk at night to soak in the shore's ambience. It wasn't a wild party weekend, just a laid-back break from the norm. Frankly, I was quite eager. Since Mike and I live in close proximity, he was going to pick me up and drive me there. That Friday, I packed a duffel bag, tossed it in his trunk, and we embarked on our journey. The first night was relaxed. We arrived around 6 p.m., unloaded our belongings in the upstairs bedrooms, and got comfortable. The house had that familiar, slightly musty beach house aroma, a blend of salty air and aged wood. It wasn't unpleasant, rather historical. It was apparent that the house had hosted numerous family summers over the decades. After grabbing a quick meal from a nearby sub-shop, we decided to stroll along the beach to enjoy the evening. Mike had brought along a couple of fishing rods, so we thought we'd try our luck at fishing for a while. It wasn't really about the catch, more about the experience. At one point, we bumped into two girls around our age. They were walking barefoot along the water's edge, and Mike, being his usual self, initiated a conversation. They were locals, or semi-locals at least, and what ensued was one of those effortless, slightly flirty exchanges that naturally occur when you're young and on the beach at night. We secured their contact information, and they resumed their stroll as we returned to our fishing. Despite it being the height of the tourist season, with people everywhere, Mike was familiar with all the secluded spots. Private access to the beach, hidden trails through the dunes, and small areas between houses that the lights didn't illuminate. We discovered a peaceful stretch of beach for ourselves, where the only sounds were those of the waves and the breeze. It was the kind of evening that allowed you to temporarily escape reality. The following morning, we arose around 9 o'clock and took a jog along the boardwalk. The day was already heating up, but a sea breeze kept the temperature tolerable. Our run wasn't strenuous, just a few miles to get the circulation going. Mike is quite the fitness enthusiast, and I've been working on staying fit, so it was refreshing to get moving after an evening of relaxation. The remainder of the day passed almost unnoticed. Later in the evening, Mike suggested we check out some bars in Seaside, but we were both exhausted. The prospect of queuing and shouting over loud music didn't quite align with our fatigued state after a full day under the sun. We opted for an early night instead. Sometime after midnight, I was startled awake by a loud, piercing beep. At first I thought it was part of a dream, but after a few moments of lying in the darkness, I realized the noise was real. It reminded me of a fire alarm, a sharp, high-pitched sound that seemed to reverberate through your brain. I sprang out of bed and began to search the room, trying to locate the source of the beeping. It didn't seem to be coming from my room or anywhere else on the second floor. After further concentration, I got the sense that the sound was actually coming from above. Instinctively, I burst into Mike's room, woke him up with urgency, and instructed him to follow me. He quickly grasped the situation and rushed after me, not even taking the time to put on a shirt. Like our lives were hanging in the balance, we sprinted upstairs, uncertain of what we might encounter. The third floor was mostly dark, save for a sliver of moonlight filtering in through a window at the end of the corridor. We turned on the lights and began to survey the area, expecting to see or smell evidence of a fire, but found nothing. No smoke, no flickering lights, no indications of a fire whatsoever. It was perplexing. After several agonizing minutes of searching for the source of the unbearable noise, I discovered something. Hidden under a pillow in one of the bedrooms was a compact black device. Before I called Mike into the room, I decided to inspect it myself, primarily due to my bafflement. It was about the size of a two-way radio, entirely black apart from a flashing red light on top. That was all. Nothing but a sleek onyx exterior, a pulsing light, and a solitary toggle on the side, or what appeared to be a toggle. Once I switched it off, the incessant beeping ceased immediately, just as Mike walked in. His gaze shifted between the bed, me, and the mysterious object in my grasp. Initially, words failed us both. Our eyes met, and I could discern his fear and confusion mirroring my own. After a moment of silence, he inquired if I had ever seen the dark gadget before. I shook my head no, and posed the same question, which he also denied. Over the next hour, we endeavored to decipher the identity of the device, how it had appeared, and what had activated it. Yet all our theories proved unsatisfactory. Mike was adamant that no member of his family had visited the house in a long while, and I trusted him. Why would he falsify such information? Moreover, who would willingly plant such a device in their home? One could assume it was a security measure or perhaps a replacement for a defective smoke alarm upstairs. But there was no sign of fire, so it hadn't even thwarted any potential crises. The question of how it was activated was the most terrifying aspect of the entire ordeal. As we sat in Mike's room in the darkness, a chilling thought crossed my mind. The toggle. I retrieved the device and swiftly toggled it on and off. As expected, the piercing beeping resumed and ceased the moment I switched it off. We both froze as Mike murmured, "Oh my God." The realization dawned on us simultaneously. The device was manual. There was another person in the house. We sprung into action. Mike called the police as I secured the door, creating a makeshift barricade. We waited an interminable amount of time until the police finally arrived. We quickly met them downstairs and briefly explained the situation. They conducted a thorough search of the house while we waited outside by the front door, as instructed. Their report was deeply unsettling. All the windows on the third floor were wide open, including the bathroom windows. But that wasn't all. The beds were overturned, drawers extricated from dressers, and items scattered across the floor. The room where I had discovered the device was in utter disarray. Despite our earlier inspection, it seemed like a completely different place, making us question our sanity. But after the police escorted us upstairs, we had to confront the harsh truth. The officers didn't find much else of interest. No hidden individual, no fingerprints, no weapons. After about 20 more minutes, they advised us to ensure all windows were locked and secure in the future, and to contact them if anything else occurred. Afterward, they simply disappeared. Mike and I were far from comfortable remaining in a house where we had just been harassed by someone, likely unhinged or under the influence in such a bizarre and unexplainable manner. Yet we had no other option. We resolved to endure the night and depart at the crack of dawn. That's exactly what we did. Fortunately, nothing more occurred throughout the night, suggesting that the trespasser had vacated the premises. There are aspects of that night that continue to baffle me. I can only speculate how Mike must have felt. For all we knew, the intruder may never have left that house. This event occurred quite a while back when I was just 22 years old. Enough time has transpired that I now feel secure speaking about it. I was a recent college graduate with a promising job and few expenses, as I was living in my childhood home with my parents. Picture that, accumulating substantial savings, with no worries about sustenance or shelter. Plus, I had unrestricted access to my old room, my vehicle, and all the familiarities of my hometown. It's accurate to say I was in a state of pure joy. Trust me, I appreciated how fortunate I was to have parents who let me live at home without charging rent. I'm aware that not everyone has that luxury, so I never took it lightly. But my life wasn't as carefree as you might assume. The event I'm about to share with you took place less than a month after I returned home. I've never been the type of person my peers would describe as a party girl. I don't overindulge in alcohol, I don't spend all my free time in clubs, and I certainly don't let men control my life in any way. My upbringing instilled these values in me. My father is the most significant man in my life, and I find the hookup culture repulsive. Consequently, my lifestyle is fairly predictable. Wake up, satiate my caffeine craving, work, gym, read a bit at home, fiddle with my phone, and sleep. Weekends are reserved for hikes, short road trips, board games, and whatever else I choose to fill my time with. However, one unexpected weekend, my best friend from college, Lindsay, invited me and our two other friends, Sabrina and Thea, to her family's beach house for a few days. I had never been before, but Lindsay's descriptions made the place sound idyllic. Quiet, secluded from the touristy hustle and bustle, boasting its own private beach, and a stone's throw from the water. Lindsay's family is wealthy, to put it plainly. Both her parents are neurosurgeons, if I remember correctly. Hence, I anticipated their beach house to be extravagant, and it did not disappoint. My first glimpse of it left me awestruck. I'm no expert in architecture, but I can recognize a modern-style house when I see one. Lindsay's house was so modern, it resembled a secret military bunker more than a private residence. I wish I could show you photos of it. Trust me, I have an ample collection. Out of consideration for Lindsay's family, I believe it would be inappropriate, especially considering the events that unfolded. Upon arrival, we unpacked our belongings and decided our sleeping arrangements. Lindsay's house had sufficient individual bedrooms for everyone, but where's the fun in that? Instead, we chose to bunk in the same room, a child's room that had 2 bunk beds and an adjoining bathroom. We were there for 3 nights, which, in my view, is the ideal duration to spend with anyone who isn't family. I'm somewhat easily annoyed, so anyone who's not neat or courteous can get on my nerves quite quickly. Not that my friends are like that, but you understand. I may have mentioned my typically mundane lifestyle before, but if there was ever a time to let loose, it was that weekend with my friends. The first night, however, we intended to keep things low-key. We strolled down to the private beach attached to the house and sat on the sand, gazing at the stars. As we sipped White Claws and listened to house music from Sabrina's speaker, we noticed a faint flicker of light in the distance. The light seemed to be swinging back and forth, like someone walking with a handheld flashlight. As the light approached, we heard laughter, and we realized it was simply a group of individuals strolling in our direction. They must have spotted us because one of them greeted us in a friendly tone. We engaged in some small talk as they approached us. They were a group of 3 guys, appearing slightly older than us, with that quintessential beach boy look. Thea seemed particularly interested, not that it was surprising. She has a bit of a wild streak when it comes to guys. In her defense, she is stunningly beautiful, and men seem naturally attracted to her. The guys joined us with their drinks, and the evening was genuinely enjoyable. They weren't overly flirtatious, but they certainly weren't dull either. Jumping ahead an hour, and several beverages later, we were ultimately asked to accompany them back to their place. Personally, I was worn out and inclined towards retiring for the night, but it was clear that all 3 of my friends were eager to prolong the evening with the guys, particularly Thea, naturally. I made the decision not to dampen anyone's spirits and opted to turn in, encouraging my friends to carry on without me. After all, there were only 3 guys, and I had no plans of getting involved with any of them that night. I made my way back to Lindsay's house while the rest of the group strolled along the beach, presumably towards the guys' accommodation. I freshened up and turned in for the night. Sometime past 3 o'clock a.m., I was awakened by a FaceTime call from Lindsay, which was surprising since she should have either been back home or sleeping next to one of the guys. I answered her call in a drowsy voice, and her words jolted me awake. She practically yelled into the phone that Thea and Sabrina had been abducted, and I needed to fetch her car immediately. Her words felt like a splash of icy water on my face. I've never experienced such a heightened sense of dread and adrenaline. I didn't hesitate for a moment. My hands were literally trembling as I swiftly dressed and bolted down the stairs. I questioned why she had contacted me instead of the police, and she assured me that she had already done so. She instructed me to stay on the line as she guided me through it. Following her directions, I managed to unlock the driveway gate, locate her car keys, and sped off within a matter of minutes. She informed me they were about 10 houses down the beach to the left, so that's where I began driving. She provided a description of the car and the direction it had taken, and I floored the accelerator to try and pursue. The road was desolate, and I was driving at a perilously high speed. It was a miracle I didn't attract any police attention. After a few minutes, I spotted a car matching Lindsay's description moving slowly in the distance. I then discontinued the call, contacted the police, and informed them of our exact location. The dispatcher advised me to maintain a safe distance to avoid alerting them to our pursuit, so that's exactly what I did. After what seemed like an eternity, I noticed police lights in the distance. The vehicle ahead of me didn't attempt to evade the police. I can only guess that they thought it was an unrelated police stop. I parked the car and observed the unfolding chaos. The cops forcefully extracted all 3 men from the SUV at gunpoint. They handcuffed them and led them back to one of the cruisers. Then one of the officers approached the trunk of the car, opened it to reveal Thea and Sabrina tied up and, from what I could see, quite seriously bruised. As terrifying as the entire ordeal was, it paled in comparison to the sequence of events narrated from their viewpoint. All 3 of them were comfortable with me documenting this. By the way, we still maintain regular contact. Naturally, I inquired, but all of them refused to pen it themselves, for a valid reason. Cutting the story short, they kept on drinking after I retired to bed. Lindsay was the only one who had a clear memory of the night's events, as she had tried to be somewhat sensible, given we were at her family home. At some point, the men accompanying Thea and Sabrina suggested they call it a night. The group of 4 separated while Lindsay informed the 3rd gentleman she was heading home. His disappointment was palpable, which Lindsay initially assumed was due to his romantic intentions towards her. She intimated that she would have been open to the idea, but had to ensure her house was safe, which led to his ire. They had a heated exchange, culminating in him asking Lindsay to leave his house and never return, a request she was more than willing to comply with. However, midway home, she realized she left her purse behind. Upon returning to retrieve it, she witnessed the men forcing Thea and Sabrina into the back of a car and speeding away. She immediately dialed the police, then me, and that was the end of that. Thea's parents, both legal professionals, navigated through numerous legal complexities to achieve 2 goals. Keep the incident as private as possible and ensure the men received severe prison sentences. They succeeded in both. It was revealed later that the place they were staying at didn't belong to them. It was the property of an elderly couple vacationing abroad. This revelation, coupled with the array of other charges, ensured they faced a lengthy incarceration. Despite this, I firmly believe there's no penalty sufficient enough to atone for their deeds. I hate to admit it, but this experience left me traumatized for years. I avoided beaches, late-night outings, and conversations with strangers, regardless of how benign they appeared or how secure I felt. I became reclusive and temporarily distanced myself from the girls. Thankfully, that has changed now. It's hard for me to fathom the impact of this incident on Thea and Sabrina. In a way, their lack of memory seems like a blessing in disguise. The most chilling aspect of this incident is the realization that had I not left early, I may not have been able to reach Lindsay's car in time. Without that, the police might never have located the men's vehicle.